This is a picture of Ninninger Hall. You never want to find yourself here, especially if you haven't done anything wrong. This is where the United States Corps Cadets Honor Committee holds its honor boards for cadets who've potentially committed an honor violation. Occasionally, some cadets will make it to Ninninger without actually having committed an honor violation. And in order for them to be found guilty, 6 out of the 9 cadets that are sitting on their board have to see that beyond a reasonable doubt they actually did commit the violation. This documentary focuses on the cadets who went through the honor investigation process and were ultimately not found. Specifically, I want to see how the honor investigation process affects relationships, stress, and perceived standing in the Corps if the cadet being investigated is ultimately not found. I theorize that cadets who have been cleared of the implication tend to have forgotten about the emotional events that occurred during the investigation, especially since nothing came of it. I also theorize that these individuals do tend to outgroup themselves, then begin self-reintegration after they're not found, even if they do not recognize it. The social theories at work here are in-grouping and out-grouping, as well as Hochschild's theory on deep acting and emotional work. The in-group in this context would be the Corps of Cadets at large, a group that the cadet being investigated was formerly in. However, as a result of the investigation process, they've actually outgrouped themselves into a new group, separate from the Corps of Cadets, that consists of themselves and anybody else they know to be going through the honor process. After these boards have been resolved, the cadets then rejoin the Corps of Cadets, leave the outgroup effectively. Because these interviews are conducted months or perhaps even a year after the actual investigation occurred, Hochschild's deep actor and emotion work applies to this, in that the cadets actually apply an emotion appropriate to the setting. The cadet recognizes that he or she is expected to feel a particular way in a situation, then they create the conditions under which that emotion could emerge. To create these conditions, the person comes up with an emotion memory, which is an autobiographical episode that carries within it strong feelings. The cadet then acts as if the feeling contained in the memory was relevant to the present moment, and this allows the cadet to actually feel the emotion appropriate to the situation. This is applicable because, as stated earlier, I theorize that cadets are placing emotions on the event that are different than what they actually felt during the investigation process. To find out if these theories are actually true, I sent an email to approximately 10 cadets who I knew fell into this category of being investigated but ultimately not found. I had 3 positive responses and ended up interviewing 2 of them to see their responses on the matter. The first interviewee is Zach Lucas and the second is Benton Barber.
In November 2016, I had an in-class essay for intermediate Spanish, LS371. And the day before class, my instructor had said something about making a note sheet, so that's what I did. During the course of the essay, I used my note sheet. It was an open book essay, and when I stood up to hand my essay into the instructor, one of the cadets behind me stood up at the same time and asked me if I'd used my notes. When I said yes, he said, "Oh, you should talk to the instructor." And they said they thought I was good. The next week, I got an email from the deputy department head of DFL, and he said we needed to have a meeting for clarification. I showed up and it was an approach for clarification, did all the paperwork, I wrote a sworn statement outlining the events, and they decided to proceed with an honor.
At the beginning of my yearling year, there was an incident where I underage drank using false identification, and so I got a alcohol board, and then later came an honor board or honor investigation.
Months later, in April, they finally began the investigation. The investigating cadets asked me questions. They looked at my sworn statement, had me type up a new sworn statement. They never interviewed the cadet that sat behind me, the one that saw me using the notes, and addressed me. If they had, I believe they would have dropped the case right there.
Filled out some sort of memorandum and sent it to the honor people and said, basically, hey, you investigated this in September and then dropped it, so you can't it'd be like double jeopardy, I think. I didn't see the memo, but something like that. When I first got in trouble, at that point I had come to terms that I was going to get found.
So once I realized that I'd made a mistake, I had that oh no moment. So I immediately went up and talked to my instructor, and when she said, oh, I think it shows a lot of character that you came forward and told me this, I thought that was going to be the end of it, but I still went to go talk to my honor officer.
Once of not hearing anything, that it was kind of over, so it's definitely a surprise coming back up. But ultimately, I was a little worried, but I figured it'd probably work out one way or the other.
I had to approach for clarification. I was okay with it. I thought it would get dropped there also. I told the same story in the same way that I told at my HIH that I told the entire way, because that's how it happened. I was pretty angry during this time. I didn't think I should have been there. There's a lot, I mean, everyone hears of cases where people get away with stuff or where people actually do an honor violation and they have to go through the process, and I didn't think I did anything wrong, so I was pretty upset that I had to go through the process.
Probably more, I guess, sad. Definitely sad at first when I found out I was going to be investigated for honor, because I thought I committed a violation, and I came to terms with that. And it was more sad that maybe I wouldn't graduate on time.
I had the same instructor actually the second semester, and I talked to her about it in class, and she said, "Oh, don't worry. Like, I think it'll be fine. You didn't do anything wrong." So I thought I'd be good the whole time.
Semester was when I was actually in trouble, and I did have I'm not saying it's because of that, but I did have my lowest GPA by far that semester. And the next semester it went up significantly when I had no punishments or repercussions or anything. As far as relationships go, I was very open to the people. I really didn't feel like anyone was necessarily looked too down on me because of what I did.
People were surprised when I told them I was under investigation for honor. Even now, people were like, "Oh wow, you had an honor board," and they're kind of surprised.
Huge wave of relief. It was honestly very much a surprise to me. So, I actually printed out the email and I had it up on my wall for a while. I still have the email somewhere. I might re-put it up on my wall.
So it was pretty scary actually when I had to stand up for them to read the verdict, and it was just, no matter if you're guilty or not, it's a stressful place being up on the 4th floor of Penninger Hall, and I would not want to be there again.
Overall, I found that these cadets did not necessarily outgroup themselves in the situation. However, they did have trouble recalling specific emotions, which confirms Hofschild's theory of emotion work in remembering past events. With this in mind, I don't really see there being any necessary potential policy changes as a result. All content in this film is my own, and I obtained express permission from these individuals to record these interviews.